Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. For the record, my name is Gabriela Coletta, District 1 City Councilor. I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Government Operations. Today is April 9th, 2024. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcasted on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, FiOS Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you are interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance of the chamber. If you are looking to testify virtually, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Megan Kavanaugh, at megan.kavanaugh, megan.kavanaugh@boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on docket number 0262, Ordinance establishing the Office of Pest Control in the City of Boston. The matter was sponsored by Councilors Flynn and Braden, and was referred to the committee on January 31st, 2024. Today, I am joined by my colleagues in order of arrival, Louis-Jean, Murphy, Weber, Flynn, and Brereton. I will pass it to the original co-sponsors for any opening remarks, and then go in that order again, Louis-Jean, Murphy, and Weber. But for now, I'll pass it over to the lead co-sponsor, Councilor Flynn, for any opening remarks that he may have. Councilor Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for chairing this important hearing. Thank you to Councilor Braden as well for her work on all matters relating to pest control as well. I do want to say thank you to the city administration team that's here, to the inspectional service chief, to Chief Dion Irish, to John Ulrich, and I want to say thank you to you, all three of you, for the important work you're doing in the city. Let me just note that I have had the opportunity to work with Dion Irish, and I know Tanya Del Rio as well, but Dion Irish and John Ulrich for many years on many critical issues, especially neighborhood services related issues, sometimes on a daily basis, and just want to acknowledge the professionalism of both Dion Irish and John Ulrich also. Last year, I filed a hearing order on the creation of an office dedicated to pest control. We heard from neighbors, city officials, about the challenges that they face when dealing with pest control. I have heard from constituents who are supportive of an office of pest control. As you know, pest control is critical to our residents' quality of life. Rats and rodents are a nuisance, but they also impact public health, sanitization of our neighborhoods, maintenance of our properties. Currently, pest control is a cross-departmental effort in Boston. Inspectional services, public works, water and sewer being the main point, inspectional service, water and sewer being the main points of contact on this issue, and 14 inspectors covering Boston. Having a dedicated city department on pest control would allow us to better focus on the issues, provide a streamlined, coordinated approach in reducing pests, and come up with a more innovative way in preventing pest infestations. This ordinance would formally create the Office of Pest Control. It would act as a central point and dedicated person in developing, implementing long-term, short-term, integrated pest management plans for individual neighborhoods based on their specific needs. It would coordinate multi-departmental efforts to reduce rats and pests, develop overall pest control strategy, conduct outreach to residents on rodent mitigation methods. I do believe we can do better in terms of pest control. We need the necessary funds. We need more personnel. But I believe that having a point person, a dedicated office that deals specifically with this issue alone would help. I'm also willing to compromise. I'm looking forward to this discussion on this ordinance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. This is the 5th year we've had this. Councillor Flynn and I have sponsored a hearing on rodent control for 4 years. This is our 5th year. And we have the same conversation every year. One thing we took out of it, our conversation about, increasing the fines. So we've sent a Home Rule petition up to the State House to ask to increase the fines for code violations. So maybe that will be an incentive for more of our absentee landlords to do better. I'm not wedded to the idea of having a rat czar per se, but I really do think that this is that we have to look at all the options any and all options to address this really troublesome and persistent issue in our neighbourhoods. It's incredibly distressing, and with the milder winters and climate change, we're not seeing a drop-off in their activity over the winter. So I know you can speak to this way better than I can. So, I think our residents are really looking to us to lead and to try and come up with some good problem-solving approaches that will actually address this issue. And I'd love to hear what I know you're working on this, and I'd love to hear what ideas you're coming up with and how we might be able to support you going forward. It is a human-created problem. We know that, so we have a lot of work to do in teaching our neighbours to dispose of their trash, etc., appropriately. But I think it's an all-hands-on-deck effort, engaging with their communities as well, and also from your departments and us as representatives to try and get everybody on board on this issue. So thank you so much for being here. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Louis-Jean.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the sponsors for hosting this. I want to say thank you to the admin. Congratulations, Commissioner Del Rio. And I just want to say that in recognition of the increasing challenges our city faces with rodent and pest activity exacerbated by the pandemic, I think that's really important to highlight. We must acknowledge that there needs to be a concerted and modern approach towards pest control. Many of our residential buildings, especially older, medium to large ones, suffer from outdated designs that hinder efficient waste management, contributing to the problem, as Councillor Braden mentioned. Residents of Boston deserve to live in sanitary conditions free from the menace of rodents and neglect by property managers, which is also why the Home Rule petition that Councillor Braden mentioned that I was happy to co-sponsor and work on is really important. As we discuss this, we have to also assess if this approach is the most efficient way of addressing the root causes of our pest control issues. My office, we dub them rat walks, and John, you are our rat czar. You are all things rats in the city of Boston, whether you like it or not. And we've been on rat walks in Roxbury, in Jamaica Plain, in Charlestown, in Mattapan, and in Hyde Park. And the tenacity that you bring to addressing this problem with our office, with our constituents, whether they're in Mount Pleasant, Vine, and Roxbury, or whether it's with, new projects that we've tried to pilot in Jamaica Plain, rat fertility with ContraPest, really looking at what else can we do to address this problem. And you've been open and willing, so I just want to commend you for that. I think as an urban city, these are issues that we deal with, but can we get better? Can we do better? I absolutely think so. I don't know if creating more bureaucracy is how we get there, but definitely more effort, more intentionality with how we're addressing issues of trash, and how we are educating the public is really important. So thank you, and thank you, Chief Irish, thank you, Commissioner, and John, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councillor Louis-Jean. Councillor Murphy, and then Councillor Weber.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the sponsors. And to thank you for being here. I did see yesterday it popped up that you had the rodent control starts with you. You know, putting out that social media post is something I know myself and my colleagues, when we've had past hearings, we've been in this chamber several times, John, with you and your team talking about this very serious issue of trash, and when we have trash, we then have rodents, and how are we going to address it to make sure every neighborhood feels like that we're listening to their concerns. And one thing does start with education. Councilor Braden, I think you mentioned, right, that the residents, right, we know that we play a part in this, and so how can we help, but then how can we make sure that with language access and, you know, in education to those walks are more than just, I've gone on them with you too. We went right into my backyard onto the porch, and it's good to, you know, get that information, but this is also to teach the residents and to be good neighbors, to do a better job. And some of the concern comes from, and it will probably be spoken to today, where, you know, absentee landlords or residents. We talked about the neighborhoods that don't have driveways and have access to keep barrels stored with tight covers. So just going forward, how are we going to address this issue? If it is a department, if it's a new agency, then that conversation starts here, and I'm happy to be part of that. But I do believe that at the end of the day, myself and my colleagues just want to make sure that we're doing everything possible to support you, John, and obviously your team, making sure that we get to the bottom of this. In the city of Boston, we can do hard things. We do it all the time, so we can tackle this if we work together. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Weber.
Thank you, Chair. This is my first pest control hearing. Thank you for Councilors Flynn and Braden for welcoming me into the fold. And you know, a couple weeks ago, I took a walking tour of the Mildred Haley apartments with Councilor Mejia, and we visited 7 or 8 apartments. The first one was full of cockroaches, and a young mom's 3-year-old had been in and out of the hospital with asthma. In all the other apartments we saw that day, there were holes in the walls from rats and mice. There were mice in stairwells, and you know, I think it's something that it impacts our health, and it's something I'm looking forward to learning from you. You know, how we can make our city safer and cleaner, especially for the folks who rely on the city for their housing. So I look forward to learning, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. I'll just briefly give an opening remarks, but just want to thank the incredible city employees who work every single day tirelessly to beautify and brighten our city and our streets. I want to give a special shout out to Brennan Conlon, who is so responsive to my office when we reach out about rat abatement and pest control. I also want to shout out Michael Brohl in Public Works, who so quickly moved heaven and earth to remove 2 tree planters in the north end that housed multiple rats' nests. And so that was a good example of government working at its most efficiency and at its highest at its most effectiveness. And so I do have the privilege of representing the North End and East Boston and Charlestown, which is the most, one of the most densely populated districts. And so more people mean more waste, and more waste attracts rats. And so we know that they're intrinsically linked. So looking forward to understanding exactly, even though we do have these conversations quite frequently in the council, but understanding what the city is doing to reduce some of the waste on our city streets. But more importantly, I'm interested in quantifying, I guess, how bad the problem actually is, and understanding exactly how we are or are not meeting constituent requests. Based on this conversation, I do want to pull back to assess whether or not this particular strategy of creating another office, in addition to the work that's already happening, will maximize our investment while actually solving the problem. So I think that this is a solution, and maybe a suite of solutions, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation and understanding what the work is actually, what the work is now that's happening. So with that, I will pass it over to our panelists, and I will introduce them, and then happy to hand it over to you in your preferred order. Chief of Operations, Dion Irish. Commissioner Tanya Del Rio of Inspectional Services, John Ulrich, who is the Assistant Commissioner of the Environment Division in ISD, and we also have Dr. Robert Bobby Corrigan, who is a consultant and urban rodentologist from RMC Pest Management Consulting, who is with us virtually. So with that, I will pass it over to the administration for your opening remarks or presentation.
Thank you, Chair Coletta. Councilor Flynn, Councilor Weber, Councilor Lujan, Braden, and Murphy. We appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation and work with you on this. This is an issue that we're absolutely 100% aligned with in terms of how important it is to address quality of life issues such as rodents. This is something that's very important to the mayor. That's why with one of the things that the mayor has recently done is promoted Mike Broll to a new role as Superintendent of Basic City Services. He planned on being here with us today, but unfortunately he couldn't be here. But his work with us is also a reflection that this is a multi-agency, all-hands-on-deck type of an issue. We have great partnerships with Water and Sewer, Public Works, Code Enforcement Unit, Public Works Sanitation Unit, the Parks Department. We can go on and on. There are many agencies that have an important role to play in this, and even within ISD, there are multiple divisions of ISD that have a role in this. We have our housing division that's doing this work with pest control within the residential areas. We have our health division that's doing this work when it comes to food establishments, supermarkets, et cetera. But no doubt, when we talk about rats, the lead agency in the city is the Environmental Services Division, led by John Ulrich, who you'll hear from later on today. But I just want to commend the council again for just always raising this issue up, because it is one of our top issues, and we know that the trend is not where we want to see it going, so we need to reevaluate, redouble, and take whatever additional steps we need to take, and we are doing that. As Chair Coletta mentioned, we have an expert with us today, Bobby Corrigan, who we reached out to him through issuing a request for proposals to bring on a consultant to help us evaluate our current program and give us recommendations on improvements that we can make. Dr. Corrigan, as you will hear when he speaks later on, is not only a national expert, but probably the world's leading expert on this. So looking forward to having the team present and then having opportunities to answer questions. So I will stop there and pass it on to Commissioner Del Rio.
Thank you, Chief. I always have trouble with this thing. I think it's on. To the chair, to the co-sponsors and the rest of the city council, and to my colleagues. First, I just want to say I'm very happy and excited to join this ongoing conversation. I have seen that not only the conversation, but the work is ongoing, and I'm personally tremendously excited to now be a part of it. So I just wanted to say that, and I'll be brief because we do have a couple of real experts on the topic here, but I want to touch on a couple of points. Number one is that I have learned in my short time at ISD and speaking with both Dr. Corrigan and John and the team that's been involved is that this is not a one department problem. Much like the work that I did in my last role with Coordinated Response Team, this is an issue that is so pervasive and so large in scale and so affecting of mostly everyone that lives in this city that it does take for every person, both a resident, city workers from different agencies to play a role. And I want to repeat what Chief Iris just said around ISD being willing, able, and having a history of playing that coordinating role and that, to an extent, that leadership around tackling this issue. That being said, it does have to be a multi-agency effort. Boston Water Sewer has been mentioned, Parks has been mentioned, BHA, and a few others need to play different roles. And I think I've seen John play in this coordinating role that we hope that he can continue playing. I think you took the words right out of my mouth, Councilor Lujan, when you said, I also think of John as our rat czar in this city. And there are thoughts and conversations around kind of amplifying that role and giving it that formal authority around coordinating. So more to come on that. I wanna also just mention or yeah, just mention that there are conversations at ISD as well around not just relating to rodents, but in general, our enforcement work and our work around collecting fines or just getting compliance of the different aspects that we oversee. So more to come on that. But I want to let John describe a little bit of what the office currently does so that we all have the same baseline of understanding, what Dr. Corrigan has been working with us, what work he's done with us so far, and give you a little bit of an overview of what the next steps would be for the year and for hopefully the longer term. So I'll let you speak on that a little bit, John.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council. John Ulrich, I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Environmental Services. Overview of our division. Environmental Services is an enforcement division of ISD. Our main function is the enforcement of the state sanitary code as it pertains to rodents and trash. We currently have 14 licensed inspectors who cover 22 wards across the city. Most of our work is generated through 311 complaints. We do a lot of work around education, producing videos for social media, hosting webinars, presenting at neighborhood association meetings, and doing neighborhood literature drops. We also have a licensing program, the Site Cleanliness License, which regulates bulk refuse containers, and those containers receive a yearly inspection from our inspections to make sure that containers are in good shape and trash is being stored properly. So currently, the Boston Rodent Action Plan is what we're calling it. It's coordination across city departments with the leadership of Dr. Corrigan to look at all aspects on how our operations affect rodent population and how we can build on the relationships we currently have to improve our effectiveness in reducing the rodent population. I would like to introduce Dr. Corrigan in the interest of time. I think he has a hard stop at 3 o'clock. Dr. Corrigan has been a city rodent consultant for over 30 years and has designed city rat management programs for several U.S. cities, as well as assisting cities on an international scale. Prior to being a consultant, he was on the staff of Purdue University for 16 years, teaching rodent control and conducting rodent control research. He has published over 160 technical publications and authored or co-authored 3 of the most popular textbooks used in the pest control industry. He has worked in Boston area several times in the past decade, as well as making rat-related visits to Boston during the Big Dig. So I would like to now turn it over to Dr. Corrigan for his presentation.
Dr. Corrigan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. And good afternoon to everyone. Again, as John mentioned, I'm a rodent consultant, and I have been working in this for it's pretty much been my entire career, quite frankly. And what I'd like to present in the short time I have with you all today is to add to everything I heard, which was very impressive. I think everybody here at this hearing understands the situation very, very clearly, which is reassuring. So I don't need to repeat any of that. What I'd like to do is just give a consultant's overview as I'm wrapping up. As I'll show you, we've had this Boston Rat Action Plan for the last 4 months, and I'm in the process of writing up the recommendations, right? So what I'd like to do is switch over to some slides to begin with, and I'm not going to do a PowerPoint per se. These are just a few slides I'd like to share with you.
Mr. Corrigan, we don't have those slides. Can we just take a moment to receive them so that all of the counselors can review them?
Sure. And while that's happening, I guess I would like to say, we did a lot of work in the last 4 months. It's pretty impressive, in fact, when I look back on this. And I think the credit there goes to the efficiency of this program, of the Boston Rat Action Plan, and certainly right out of Chief Irish's office with Derek DeSalva, John Ulrich, Tanya DeRico, Lisa Timberlake. As a consultant, I can say anything I asked for in terms of data, which I did several times, different kinds of data covering different avenues, was within 24 to 48 hours, it was produced. Anyone I asked to meet with, and as I'll share with you, any departmental experts and departmental specialists I asked to meet with was set up and arranged for field visits and what have you. So the efficiency, it was just very, very impressive. And I want to thank everybody for that efficiency. It just makes a consultant's life much easier. And all of that's going to be reflected in the final report coming this month.
Okay, Dr. Corrigan, I was mistaken. We do have access to the presentation. It was sent to the counselors ahead of time, so I apologize for that, and please feel free to go right ahead.
Okay, all right. So this is going to be a background on rodents and the BRAP progress. And I'll just say next for each slide. So next. As you can see, this is my overview, but it reflects what I try to understand, and Boston's no different in many ways from other cities with rats, and there's plenty of cities these days with rats, as was just intimated. Rats in general as a species on a global scale, they are increasing, and in some cases very dramatically. And as I'll point out in the next slide, this animal, we're not talking about the biology or behavior of this animal. We all know what the Norway rat looks like in Boston, in and around Boston. But it's an incredible mammal, and it seems it's all kinds of environmental issues going its way, and also there's all kinds of things going its way with the human population, how it relates to this animal. Next. So we're looking at the megalopolis, starting with Boston at the top and what's called the Boswash, megalopolis, all the way down to Washington, D.C. And I can tell you that each one of these cities right now, currently, as we have this hearing, are experiencing heavy loads of rat activity. And it's not just measured by complaints. There's lots of different things we can do to measure rodent populations. We'll never know how many rats are in each city. That's almost even a question that's not important. But it's important, as we know from different metrics, that the populations are up and they continue to show an upward trend. Next. So our 4 months together, in this consulting project actually started before January 2024. John Over contacted me months before that saying, we're interested in a design, we're interested in architecture, but what would it look like to have a very progressive, very preventive, very detailed program for managing rats in our city, right? And that is my job as a consultant. That's what I keep in front of me at all times, is we want this to address all the issues everyone just mentioned in this hearing. During February, we had virtual meetings with the essential department team leaders, one at a time. We went through those that Chief Irish's office set up with Derek De Silva. In March, just last month, I was in Boston with the teams, and we did field assessments. And I'm going to share just a couple of those photographs with you in a second. Not that I have hundreds and hundreds of photographs from working on the Boston Rat Action Plan. But I want to show representative cases and talk about this complexity that's been brought up today at the hearing, because that word describes it all. And finally, this month, as I mentioned, I'm putting together my recommendations and considerations and design thoughts for going forth. Next. So, as again was mentioned, the essential, and I'm using that word, and it was mentioned several times, that this, rats in any city, you have to be collaborative. You have to all work together. There's 1 month and maybe one department that's going to have more emphasis than another, and it's going to switch back and forth. But essential agencies right here, starting from the mayor's office and working our way through, are ones that are pretty much going to be involved every single time. And for all the years I've been teaching rodent control, I always say to everyone, there's actually a kindergarten lesson when it comes to rat control in cities, and that is no food equals no rats. These are not amazing animals in that they can live without food. They must, just like us, they must have their caloric intake, they must have nutritional balance, they must have food for energy, and no food, no rats. Now, it's easier said than done. Nevertheless, that's critical out of the public works and sanitation. Of course, we have to have public health. And again, this was mentioned, that, these animals have the potential, and that's the key word, the potential to carry and transmit pathogens to people and services and restaurants and anything. So we have to watch that at all times. We must have inspectional services at all times. And as you're talking about John Ulrich, I found the same exact sentiment when working with John in the field and going through many meetings online. It's like, this guy really knows what's going on. He is Boston's rat czar, kind of, right? So thank you for all that work, John. Certainly parks. Parks are one of the favorite homes of all rats everywhere because this animal came from an area of Mongolia where they dug into good soil as their burrows. That's their natural home. So any park that goes up in any city, rats are going to gravitate towards that. Boston public housing in this case, very important department. So is capital and commercial construction. And finally, so is Water and Sewage Commission. Without a doubt, second to parks, if you could interview rats, they'd say, yes, parks and sewers are our number 1 and 2 areas where we like to breed, have our families, and move out from there. Next. So to this complexity, this is my drawing off my clipboard. It actually was transferred into a scientific publication of which we published in a journal. But we don't have to go through all these circles, but what I'm trying to show here is what we're at. This hearing. There's roughly 30 different components to this local chronic population. Now, whether we're in Chinatown in Boston or whether we're in the North End or whether we're downtown Boston, when there's a chronic population that keeps reappearing, and the frustration I just heard from many of you as to what do we do, what do we do? The design and architecture comes into place right here. This is not a case where, well, we get more pest control people, or we get more pest control products, or we get more and more and more of something. Every case, every area has to be carefully assessed as to what the environmental issues are in those areas among these 30 different pieces and parts, and which part gets the biggest slice of the pie in one case, but the smallest piece of the pie in another, and all the weighted areas of which we've developed models for that. Right, so that's what we're up against, and that's the job. Again, my job as a consultant to serve Boston is to how do we put those pieces together, and especially going forth, so we have a sustainable. And I have to stress that this has to be sustainable. This has to be not just where will we be next year in 5 years. Where will Boston be with rats in 20 years? Because quality of life has to be sustainable, starting as soon as possible on the rats in your city. Next. So without, I'm not going to take you through many word slides. I'm going to skip just to some photos here. But these are the areas we field assessed during March. Now, again, I've done also my own thing, as John Ulrich has mentioned. I've been to Boston actually multiple times over the years for rats for all kinds of different reasons. But I'm very familiar with, the streets, the parks, the backgrounds, and going all the way back to the Big Dig with Bruce Colvin, Dr. Colvin, and others. But certainly, we met with the street sanitation. We rode with the street sanitation DPW folks. Tremendous. Gave us all the time we needed to answer any question we had. We visited various parks, both large and small, Boston Commons, as I'll show you. We had to, and I sent these to Chief Irish's office. I need to see several commercial food serving neighborhoods and areas. That's very important, as you can imagine. Residential streets and alleys, the Boston Housing Authority we went to and met with BHA folks. I randomly picked, just because we couldn't go on forever, but North End and randomly Boston Market. Next. So we're in the Boston Commons. Everyone knows that. Everyone can spot it. It's just a beautiful, gorgeous park, of course, one of the country's most beautiful parks in the East Coast. And in front of us, going all the way down the slope, you'll see fresh, new, very large rat burrows with fresh dirt all kicked out And you can't see in the lower end, but we could probably add another 8 burrows to what you see just here when I took this picture. The reason I stress this is those are breeding burrows, meaning those are very specific for the rats that dug those out to have families. This is the time when the rats reproduce in great numbers. And so Boston Commons also, being a park, it's not that anyone's doing anything wrong in a park and managing it, it's just that they're parasites on our parks for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Next. We switched to a neighborhood, a popular neighborhood, one of the older neighborhoods, as was mentioned here, with older buildings and what happens as time goes by. But if we walk down the street, and that's the team right in front of me, I hung back to take some pictures here. But even this one street, this one scene where the team is ahead of me is a very complex situation with rats. This is not about just like, well, okay, you know, there's rats in this area, let's put out some professional level baits or some traps or what do we do? What do we do? So there could be 15 interrelated pieces that make up the rats of just these 2 blocks as to what do we do scientifically to make sure these rats can be sustainably controlled. Not with Band-Aids that fall off very quickly, but sustainable so that people say, I haven't seen a rat in months. That's the goal, I think, of the design of the bee rat. Next. We just take right off of those streets there that I just showed, we just take a detour into one of the alleys behind some of those very touristy, nice-looking streets where people would love to sit and have dinner, and we're in this alley right here. This is there. And you can see, quite honestly, you know, and I said to the team, I said, you know, this is deplorable by any standard, you know, and I've been in some of the worst rat infestations around the world, and this is unacceptable, right? This is completely unacceptable, but, you know, and all those cans, there's rat burrows almost between every one of those blue garbage cans, and there's doors leading into businesses and so forth. More concerning is to the right is a children's playground. So we have rats in those kind of scenarios. Those, to me, of course, and I'm sure to John Ulrich and others, and John mentioned it that day, goes, this will get immediate attention, you know. But it's a case of this will get back to the word I hear everybody's speaking about, and that is, this is about sanitation, this is about garbage, and this is about commercial property owners' responsibilities and ownership as to, no, we are not going to do this. Next. Of course, dumpsters get a lot of attention, you know, not as much, quite frankly, as the plastic cans lined up in a row, as we just seen. But nevertheless, most people do not know how to use dumpsters. They get overused, they get abused, people just throw trash at that big opening and often miss, and it ends up on the ground. And as you can see, actually here in the left where this food spills and the rats will come out and sometimes can just climb a pole and jump into a dumpster. So dumpsterology, quite frankly, is something that's very, very critical to any city, including and especially Boston, as to there must be a dumpsterology effort as to rats and dumpsters go hand in hand. Just like I just mentioned, rats and plastic bins go hand in hand. Next. And we joined up with the sewers. Boston Water and Sewers Commission, again, outstanding cooperation. Anything that I put forth to the department said, here's where I need to go, here's the sewers I want to look at. I want to look at these sewers, the small sewers, the medium sewers. They were outstanding. Just like, tell us where you want to go, we'll pull any manhole you wish, and we'll put the camera down and so forth. And you can see, you know, one of our professionals was just outstanding to watch just how good they are at pulling a manhole so quickly on any one I pointed to. And so if we look into the next slide, you can see once you get into a sewer, I don't know how many people get into sewers, but I actually started my career in sewers, saving money for college. I worked in sewers going after rats. That was my very first job, and from there I went back to school. But you can see our friend right there on the left. Old sewers of Boston, or old sewers of any city, they're prone because the rat says, I need to go below ground to exist. And whether it be in a park borough, whether it be in a sewer and this kind of thing, that whole wall where I took this picture, as you go down, you'll see rat heads popping out of the brick, and then as you walk by, they pull back into their nest. Their nest is in that wall behind the brick. They dig out a tunnel just like they do in parks. Next. Residential, this is a randomly selected slide of the many, many slides I took of Boston residential areas. It's very nice, it's very peaceful, it's very clean in this spot, but if you go not too far away, it all depends on how people will take out their trash and understand through education, which is a word that was just mentioned several times, absolutely must have educational programs and outreach programs and community meetings as to the importance of, if we wish for this property to remain rat-free, and that is definitely the goal, it starts with, let's talk about education, and let's talk about the simple words, how do we take out the trash? It almost sounds insulting to have a meeting like that, but most people take out the trash, but 25% do not know how to take out the trash, as crazy as that sounds. Next. Not far away, and these are rat burrows, completely fresh, completely digging out. That's the front of a residence, and as you can see from the bikes, children live in that residence. And the rats are urinating there, defecating, they're active there, and so forth. Has to be corrected. And again, with our team, as we work together, it's like, this is priority one. Let's get something going here and take care of this. Next. As I'm wrapping up, of course, this is, another playground, always catches my eye, should catch everybody's eye, next to a school kind of building, and those areas that one must have stay rat-free, and that has to come with surveillance on a regular basis. Someone is passing through there as a rat expert, making sure out of ISD and so forth that it stays rat-free and there's no conducive conditions to draw the rats to those areas. Next. Boston Housing Authority, we spent a day with the Boston Housing Authority going through and understanding and listening to their issues and concerns and frustrations and these kinds of things, and looking for tips as things we could do with, again, whether it be Boston Housing Authority or any other property in any other city, is how do we take care of what's immediately in front of us. Sometimes it only takes one house on a block or one apartment in an apartment building to spoil it for everyone. You could have one block on a house of 10, and the 10 is spotless, but then there's one right around the block that's not. It will ruin it for the block of 10 spotless houses. Similarly, in an apartment, it would take one resident, one apartment, to make that whole area look like it's filled with rats if the garbage is available. Next. And finally, before I just mentioned 2 quick points, we went to the Boston public market, and we looked around. This is an area, as you can see, with all the tents extending on completely down the wharf, down into the block. It's a rat's dream when all the food gets put out, and the smell of fish and meat and chicken and cooking on the weekends as the spring comes up. Of course, rats are going to emerge from sewers. They're going to emerge from park areas. They're going to follow their nose, sometimes blocks, to get to those food smells. And people will say, well, it looks like the public market has rat problems. Well, doesn't mean they're living there, but certainly whenever we do a lot of food prep into the open air, whether it be a picnic in a park or whether it be something of this extent, there's billions and billions of food molecules wafting down to the ground, of which the rats in some burrow somewhere, they're all going to follow that. Next. During this visit, it was fascinating to me as a scientist that, there's efforts out of Boston that there's a pilot going on a rat-proof litter basket. So I took these pictures, and, it was just my first blush, if you will, as to, wow, so let's look at this pilot, and it's the kind of thing, and Boston's not the only one thinking about this. All kinds of people are saying, we need to design a rat-proof litter basket. To me, that is one of the most important things that could be done. In addition to people's trash, residential trash, commercial trash, dumpsters and everything, the city itself has a responsibility not to put out litter baskets that rats can access all night long. And without going to anybody's residential property or any restaurant's property or nothing, if we have litter baskets where people are putting in their litter, especially if they're not collected till the next morning. So this project, this pilot, kudos to the city of Boston. This is absolutely critical, and I understand it's a pilot. It's going to be ongoing and stuff, but I see the person using the foot pedal there to open it up and what have you. That was, I think, a fairly new litter bin we were looking at, but I walked away thinking, you know what, that my first blush without putting it in a laboratory and testing it, that's darn impressive and good thinking on the city. And finally, next. So I'm going to stop here. I do want to mention that this too I see throughout Boston. And these are, for those of you, I think everybody might know, but just in case, those are bait stations. They're called bait stations. Those are tamper resistant. People can't get into them without a key, nor can a dog or a raccoon and what have you. But there's poisons in those. This would never, in my opinion, be necessary like this. But I picked up as I left Boston, I said there's somewhat of it seems to me, a dependency, and this will be in the report, of people might think in Boston that this is the corrective action for how to control the rats in Boston. It certainly is not. It certainly is not. This is consider this one of those Band-Aids I mentioned. Can baits be used here and there to help with a situation before all the IPM that, Councilor Flynn mentioned, integrated pest management? Yes, they have their place. But this, if the person ordered this and purchased this, is because they had a lot of rats. They didn't have a lot of rats unless they had a lot of food available to those rats. And so I'd like to see whatever the monies that were spent on this, which quite frankly had to be significant, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, that money could be redirected as to what kind of garbage receptacles do I need to purchase, or do we need to purchase. So I just want to leave you with the impression that this would never be the approach I would recommend, even though, again, I recognize the importance of tools here and there. But this was in place of IPM that should have been done. Next. And with that, I'll stop, and I'll take any questions or concerns or anything. There will be a final report also issued to the City of Boston. Again, this is the month where I'm obligated to finish that report and get it in. But I just wanted to give that overview. So I'll stop here and take any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Corrigan, for that informative presentation. For now, I will go to the lead co-sponsors for questions and then go to councilors in order of arrival. I just want to mention that we've been joined by Councilor Borrell, and I do want to quickly read an absence letter from Councilor Julia Mejia before we go to Councilor Flynn for his questions. Dear Chair and members of the Committee on Government Operations, I am writing to inform you of the possibility that I may not be able to attend today's City Council hearing on this docket. While I look forward to participating in this hearing, I have encountered scheduling conflicts that may prevent my attendance. In the event that I cannot make it, I would like to extend my appreciation to Councilor Flynn for his leadership in addressing an issue that impacts the entire City of Boston. Please know that I am fully supportive of this ordinance and the establishment of an Office of Pest Control, and I want to ensure that this is recorded. Sincerely, Julia Mejia, Boston City Councilor at Large. Okay, and with that, I will go to Councilor Flynn for any questions he may have for the panel or Dr. Corrigan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you to the panel. Thank you to Dr. Corrigan as well, who I had the opportunity to speak with recently. Chief Irish, what are the barriers that might make it difficult to establish an Office of Pest Control, and how can we possibly remove those barriers?
I think for me, I would say that we have an Office of Pest Control. I think we can probably do some work to, as Commissioner Del Rio mentioned, how do we amplify that? How do we take in whatever recommendations are coming from Dr. Corrigan? How do we implement best practices and elevate it and ensure that everyone understands that this is our lead agency, but this also needs to be a coordinated approach across city agencies, and quite frankly, we're already seeing effects of that. These conversations we're having, we're seeing a great partnership. I think currently there's a group of us with the Parks Department, John's team, and others are working on, I think it's the DeFilippo Park in the North End. So we're seeing great coordination already, but we're always looking for ways to get better. But to answer your question, I think we already have that office. But I agree with you that we can elevate and we can amplify the work of that office and improve coordination.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was my goal and Councilor Braden's as well in talking about and addressing this issue for the last 5 years is how do offices, departments coordinate and communicate in ensuring that we're not duplicating efforts, but we're streamlining approaches and providing the best quality of life to residents across the city. That's our number one priority. It's a major public health emergency. It's a public safety emergency, in my opinion, as well. It contributes to high asthma rates, especially for people of color and people living in public housing developments. I think it's important for us to have a standalone City of Boston Department on Pest Control. And I do think John Elrick is doing a very good job. But I think we need to elevate this issue. It's that important to the residents of Boston. It's probably the number one issue I receive calls on or emails on or text or visiting residents talking about this issue throughout the city. I'm going to stop there and give my colleagues an opportunity to ask questions as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Braden, the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, Council President Louis-Jean has a time limitation. She'd like to go before me, if that's okay.
Councilor Louis-Jean, you now have the floor, and just so everybody knows, I'm giving everyone 5 minutes for their questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, the Councilor of Rat City. I appreciate you deferring to me so I can make my next meeting. But my two questions, really, I have a few, but just what I want to put on the table. How we leverage the technology that we have, such as GPS tracking of rat sightings, to predict and prevent rodent migration before they escalate. I think it's important that we capture them as soon as possible to prevent. I think Dr. Corrigan was talking about how it just takes one house on the street. So how do we better identify that one house and try to track? I mean, that's what we're trying to do with the rat pilot in JP, with the fertility pilot in JP, to try to prevent it from further spread. And how will this enable us to have targeted interventions in specific neighborhoods? And have we identified patterns of infestation linked to particular properties or areas, suggesting that certain locations or management practices contribute more significantly to the problem?
Thanks for the question, Councilor. We do have a current system where we're collecting the data. Collecting the work that we're doing, 311 complaints, our reaction to it, but we haven't completed how we're going to use that to predict the work. So that is in the future.
The GPS.
It's a GIS mapping of multiple data sources, and so we're looking at those data sources to see how we can best use that to be more proactive in the work.
Okay, and is there anything about particular properties or management practices? That question, like, are you able to glean anything from like where you see infestations happening? I know, like, for the pilot that we're doing in Vine Street and Pleasant Mount Vine in Roxbury, there were certain actors, unfortunately some of our nonprofit organizations, that we sort of are working with and hand-holding to get better. But are there areas where you see
So I would say density and trash management, and in areas where there's less ability to contain the trash, so that if the trash is able to become a food source for rodents, and density.
So more so along the lines of like actors who should be on, if they aren't already, on the problem properties task force.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. So are you saying that is there a way to address property owners that are troubled? Yes, we do it through the enforcement coordination with our violations and code enforcement, like we did at Mount Pleasant. The combination of Parks Department dealing with the issues in the parks, ISD writing our violations, which are not punitive but remedial, that end up in housing court, along with punitive code enforcement tickets, I think is the most effective way.
Yeah, and I get that. I guess the question was more so like, is there a pattern that you can see? And I'm not saying like in every neighborhood it's going to be the CDC, or in every neighborhood it's going to be like, but is there a particular type of actor? And I guess your response is that it depends on density and trash management, and those who are on the problems properties task, on the problem properties list are more likely to be the ones that have the trash.
The ongoing issue.
Yeah, so sort of like, is there a correlation there?
I would say, off the top of my head, sometimes student housing or areas where we have absentee landlords,
Okay.
become challenging.
And then lastly, I know that there were developing neighborhood-specific integrated pest management plans. What are the new and innovative methods that we're looking at as we develop those integrated plans?
Well, it's looking at individual needs of each neighborhood. So each neighborhood, especially around trash, trash pickup, trash storage, density, stuff like that. And then how do we do education, responsive, what techniques we can use? If there's more parks, is there more assistance that our staff can do around education, treatment, using our carbon monoxide, dry ice, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to my colleague, Councilor Braden, for allowing me to proceed here. Thank you.
Can I just add also that I know we're also planning to use data, to collect more data, tracking sewers to get an indication of if there's a population rise. And I know we're also working with a group of students from MIT who are collecting data on a project to hopefully do some predictive analysis on where we can expect to see a growth in rodent population.
Awesome, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councilor Louis-Jean. Councilor Burden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, there's a lot to unpack. I think the whole issue about containerization and having receptacles that have got lids attached, and I thought that was a really important piece of the puzzle until my neighbours, young people moved in September. Place had rats, had trash, lots of problems. We lent them tools. They went and bought new bins. They sent the bill to their landlord, and we thought, right, good, we're in good shape. Out a few weeks ago, a young woman called us over. The rats had eaten right through the new bin. So they put the new bin with the hole in it aside and called the landlord. The landlord got them a new bin, another new bin, and we went back 3 days later and the rats had eaten through the second new bin. Like, it's really challenging, even for folks who are trying to do the best they can and they're really on board with this, that, I don't know, rat-proof bins. I don't think there's such a thing as a rat-proof bin. But that's just one of the challenges for folks who are really trying to do the right thing. I think one issue we didn't talk about is just the whole issue about dog feces and how, I think that's part of the issue maybe around parks, is that, I didn't realise that it's like gourmet rat food, dog poo, and I don't know, again, how are we approaching this in terms of education for our dog owners across the city? Are we working with those groups, or...?
We do. We flyer. We share information, digital information around. It's something that most folks don't think about, cleaning up after their dogs. Enforcement is difficult with dogs. If you don't clean up after your dog, it's difficult to be there and catch somebody who does it. So reporting it to 311, making sure that if you see it's an issue, reporting it so Public Works could clean up after it. There are organizations out there. There's one in the North End Rough that we're currently working with, sharing information. They had a little bit of a rat issue, so coordinating with community groups, sharing whatever information we have.
Yeah, I think you're using your 311 data to find out where the hot spots are. I'm just wondering, I think in Alston, Brighton, at this point, people are just saying, "Oh, what's the point?" They don't even report it anymore because it has to be pretty bad before you get a call, because they just almost think, what's the point? This is part of the reality of living in Alston, Brighton. I just don't know, in terms of rat reports from Alston, Brighton, what are you finding? Because I know it is a pervasive problem.
Austin Brighton is a challenging neighborhood, but every single 311 complaint, rodent activity, should be responded within 24 to 48 hours in a full inspection. We write a violation if it's somebody complained about a neighbor and there's an infestation. Property owners are required to correct that and rid the property of rodents. But we provide whatever assistance we can. But every 311 call should be responded to within 48 hours.
Yeah. I'm just wondering about how the efficacy of the contraceptive bait is there any evidence that that's a good tool to have?
So I would say that the evidence is the product works from what I've seen in closed populations, but in an urban open population of rodents, it's challenging. We haven't had much success. Dr. Corrigan, if he's still on, could speak to different areas in the country.
He's still on, yeah.
Yes, and I just realized I didn't stop my video earlier, so I'm so sorry for staying in the dark. However, what John just mentioned is true. I'm very familiar with the contraceptive approach for rats with that product. In fact, we were one of the first to try to test it in New York City subways years ago. I think it's important that those two words John just said is open and closed. In cities, as I showed with that chart with all the circles, each of those circles can represent a different satellite and even a main colony of rats. And so therein lies the challenge. If you had only one circle and you use the contraceptive within that circle, there's no doubt that any of the rats that ingested the contraceptive, according to the label, it has to be multiple times, those rats in that circle, they're not going to be able to reproduce on a long basis. However, sometimes, rats, when the reproduction slows down, space opens up. Like all of a sudden a hotel has a vacancy sign up. And rats from outside those circles then say, well, life is better where those rats were. And so it's difficult if you could get the entire city and all areas around that area on a contraceptive program, which probably at least in theory, you could do it. But it'd be very expensive, very labor intensive, and we would need some research to show it actually can be done, which we do not still have from the manufacturers. Any empirical, scientifically proven, for a referee journal, data that shows it reduces rat populations in cities. We do not have any such research.
I think the other issue is, in years gone by, dogs ran around, cats ran around, everybody had their animals outside. Rats had natural predators. I think I was very hopeful about coyotes, but they don't seem to have got the memo. and the hawks, the raptors and the owls and hawks, they tend to get poisoned, so that's difficult. I just don't know, are there any natural predators? I know during the Big Dig that they brought in red-tailed hawks into the city, like I'm assuming, or is that an urban legend that they brought red-tailed hawks in, and that it helped to address the rat population, but also reduced our pigeon population?
I'm not sure if they brought them in. I know that there was a program to bring the population back, but I don't know if it was tied to the Big Dig.
Okay, yeah.
Councilor Braden.
All right, I'm done talking about all the little animals.
Thank you. I know at some point we'll get to the urban myth of the skunks and East Boston, but that's
right.
for a different day. Okay, who's next? Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
And thank you, Dr. Corrigan. I did Google you because I wanted to see what does a ratologist look like, but now here you are on the screen. I can see you. So thank you for all of your information there. And some of the questions that my colleagues brought up already are kind of tie into that question of, and I've heard it again from all three of you separately, but we have to work on this together. It's across all different departments, but, and it's not about finger pointing or blaming, but at the end of the day, like, who is responsible? And we've had trash hearings and other hearings about dumpsters and trash collection and talked about the landlords or the absentee landlord. And Councilor Braden gave that good example of tenants who are trying to do the right thing, landlords who are supporting that. So at the end of the day, and some of the slides you showed, Dr. Corrigan, where, you can have an apartment building of 3 or 20 and 19 of them can be doing the right thing, but if that one person doesn't, so is it the landlord who's ultimately responsible? Is there, you talked about the dogs, and, last year, Councilor Flaherty often talked about the feces of dogs was, the best food for our rats and keeping it alive. And you mentioned rough, so I'm jumping around a little here, but I think that's a good avenue too when we talk about outreach and information. We have so many I'm a dog owner, I go to the park, sometimes we go in the backyard, but so many different dog walking organizations or Charlestown dogs. There's just so many different organizations out there that maybe could help put that information out there too. Because if you're a dog owner, you're also living here in the city, you probably also have rat issues. And I know I've shared before that my dog Winston died from rat poisoning, that the neighbor was trying to do the right thing with the trash barrels and ate the poison. And so it's a balance here. So what do we do? And it's not about blaming, but at some point in this game of trying to get ahead of the rats, right? Like what can we do? And what kind of legislation? I know we've talked about trash time pickup. They have to have trash stored during the day, but they can bring it to the street in bags. So is there anything that policy changes we can make on the council that would help support some of these ideas you guys have?
I can certainly take the question about ownership, Councilor. We certainly see ISD as willing and able to take that ownership around convening the departments under John's leadership, and certainly with Chief's support, my own, and the mayor's support ultimately. And I'm guessing that on that call to action for the council, we can count on you too for that education awareness raising component and support of the office. So I think we are willing, able, and happy to fulfill that role. I hope, does that answer it?
Yeah, I think also though, with you have the role, and I appreciate that, but then if it's the landlord is doing the right thing, but there's a tenant who isn't, and we've had many hearings which are important about, tenant rights, unrelated to rats at all, right? And making sure that tenants have rights, but at the same time, there's responsibilities too for every resident in the city. So how do we differentiate? And is it a fine? And we know that for many people who can afford it, that's just the cost of doing business. So the fine doesn't stop it at all, really. So not for everyone, but for some. So
yeah, and the chief mentioned the involvement of ISD's housing division, which is complementary, and I would say complementary and parallel to the work the environmental division is doing. So those folks will receive, whether it be a landlord or a tenant complaint, mostly a tenant complaint around this type of condition inside the building. We can go lay eyes on it and determine where the situation is coming from. So whether it be there's a cleanliness aspect that needs to be taken care of by the tenant, or there's a situation was more structural around the property or the unit that needs to be taken care of by the landlord, or sometimes the source is outside, and then we'll coordinate. So one thing I wanted to also say in answering your question was, we are certainly eager to see what recommendations are coming out of Dr. Corrigan's work here, because there's probably going to be a need for multiple agencies, also awareness raising, to follow on those recommendations. So we're planning to use that as our roadmap moving forward.
So just two things I have to chime in, just because I started my career as a housing inspector. And so one of the things I've always tried to make sure people understood that although the housing code has most responsibilities are for the landlord, there are things in the code where we can hold a tenant or occupant responsible for housekeeping and things that contribute to pest infestation. So that is a tool that we have. And also going back to your other part of your question is, we need to, we shouldn't point the finger at each other. We need to figure out how do we work better together. And I already see progress in that regard. I see the Parks Department now asking John for advice on what type of trash barrels to buy, right? And Public Works, now they're including ISD in the conversations around trash collection contracts. So we're already seeing those things take effect.
One last quick thing. We encourage residents to call 311. What should we do? Like, should we call John directly, or is there something the counselors should do, our offices, that would be more streamlined to? I know we all have your number and you're amazing and you'll pick up at any time, but wondering if there's some sort of flow chart that we should be following just to make sure that everyone is aware and we're not putting more work on John directly.
The best way for us to track cases is a 311 case number. So I would say recommend reporting at 311 so that we can create the case and then follow up with a phone call or an email with that case number information.
Yeah, and I also would like to add, and Councilor Braden mentioned this earlier, there some folks don't use 311 as much as other folks in other neighborhoods. So for equity's sake, John's team is also proactive and identifying issues, and they actually, I think, create some of your own 311 cases that are self-created as well.
I think myself and other colleagues too, call 311 for them if they know they haven't reported it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and our inspectors create 311 cases every day.
Oh.
Yeah, when we're out there. When we do an inspection, it's the complaint address, and then we do a couple addresses to the right and to the left. So.
And not to belabor it, and you spoke to this, but to make it a little more explicit, the proactive modeling that the students are working on, Councilor Bladen, you asked about it, they are weighing that data so that it accounts for the inequities just based on how the usage of 311. And they're taking in data sources in that model from water, sewer, and a couple other sources so that we can get a more complete picture than we would from simple 311 case count.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Weber, and then Worrell.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Corrigan, it sounds like if we take nothing else from today, it's that the most effective way to handle rodents is to deprive them of food.
Yes, that is the bottom line. Number one address is, they must have food. So, and just by way of an example, looking at another large city of any sort along the East Coast, there's about 22 different foods, not celery versus tomato versus meat, 22 different sources of how rats get their food in a city like Boston. And so again, I want to stress that has to be organized and prioritized and identified as to, okay, there's 22, but if we weight them, as we're talking about in predictive modeling as an example, which is a good way to do it, is what is 80% of their food? And is it dumpsters? Is it plastic bins? How is that, and how can we intervene on that? But yes, it's food.
And and then are you saying that the contraceptive, poison, traps, I don't know, should we even be looking at that, or should we put all of our energy into the food issue?
Well, I'm all for pilots. Of course, as a scientist, I think everything's worthy of being tested and put through its paces and what have you. So I would say, should you abandon that pilot or whatever you're doing with contraceptives? I would say no to that. But however, it must be carefully designed so you actually have control as to, are the metrics correct for being able to measure efficacy? Say, just pick a small area, 4 square blocks or something, and measure that. But that's research and discovery, and that should come from a company. Where's the data? Please support us, give us the data, or prove it to us that this product works, like almost every pharmaceutical has to do to EPA and FDA and so forth. So, but I would say this, as part 2 to that answer is, I think you're going to see in my report for sure, there's a heavy emphasis on innovative ways to look at trash in Boston. And that was part of my primary reason for making sure I spent time with your sanitation experts and going around and seeing it myself and walking the streets myself and looking at that. Are there improvements that can be made to deter the rats or even getting to the garbage in Boston? The answer is yes.
Okay, yeah, most people here in the city dispose of their trash in plastic trash bins. So I guess back to you, Dr. Corrigan, is that an effective tool for keeping the rats away from the food? Is that, if everyone puts their trash in a plastic bin, have we done our job? Or is there an issue with the plastic bins because the rats eat through them? How does that work in other cities? And then even if we do that, is there still another issue with food that we're not thinking, if everyone puts their trash in plastic bins?
Well, plastic is the key word, for sure. And it's not so much plastic, but it's the quality of the plastic, it's the density of the plastic, it's the matrix of the plastic. So right away you end up in those drop-down boxes again. So certain types of plastic, and I'll use the general term of high-density plastic and very thick plastic, rats can't really get through. And so there are approved plastic containers for rats. One thing's for sure, and most landlords, for example, when they think about, I need new trash cans, say, for the apartment building, they're not thinking that they should buy anything that's really durable. They're thinking it's just a trash can, and trash is sloppy, and everybody knows, so why spend much money on a trash bin? So you get online, you'll see you can get trash bins for $39.95, or you can get them for $139.95. It's $139.95 if you live in a rat-afflicted city. That's the choice you want. And if you go a step further than that, there is a rat-proof garbage can. There absolutely is. And it's called stainless steel with a stainless steel lid with a bungee cord, and it's kept clean and it's kept organized. That is rat-proof. The rats will not and cannot get through metal.
So, yeah, Mr. Ulrich, what do you see across the city in terms of like the quality of our, the trash bins we're using?
I would say it's a variety of different, the most effective ones we see, like Dr. Corrigan said, are the 96-gallon totes, high-density plastic, has a bar on it where the garbage truck can pick into it, so we're not throwing the barrels, the covers are attached, so we're not losing covers. I find those to be really the most effective. Metal barrels are great. But they tend to get kind of beat up. The garbage men, they're throwing them, they might get dented. If the lid doesn't fit tightly, then there's access to the food.
Okay, yeah, and so I guess if somebody at home has a hole in the bottom of their plastic bin, they should replace them.
They should replace it, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, so I don't know how.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I guess, so Dr. Corrigan, is there, I assume as long as there's been cities, there's been urban rat issues, but you showed us the map of the eastern northeast corridor. What is going on now that's fueling this? Is it climate change, or is it the kind of food we eat, or is we just lazier than Romans were? What would you say is driving this?
So among all us scientists that study this kind of thing, it's hard to get to one guilty, big smoking gun. However, climate change is impacting this. And in fact, I'm one of an author on a scientific paper that we were able to show using cities around the world that the global climate change definitely is contributing to this. It's not the only factor. But because the mild winters are repeating themselves for the last decade, we've had the warmest decade in all of history. We've been keeping weather records, and so too are the rats climbing. The rats do not hibernate, so they used to shut it all down when we had cold winters in Boston and New York and DC and so forth. They would stop all reproductive activities. It was just too cold to have babies and they would die. So now we have mild winters where just enough is allowing them to eke out, say, one more litter. Well, one more litter, when you do logarithmic growth among rodents across all cities, you're going to end up with tremendous rat populations exploding. And secondly to this is there's more people moving into cities. Cities are becoming more dense with people. And as we know, every one of us in this hearing, for example, we all generate about, on average, 5 pounds of trash every 24 hours, of 30% of which is food trash. And so there's more people, there's more food trash, there's more density of the people, and we end up with It's all in the rats' benefit, and all of those things are playing into this.
Thank you, Dr. Corrigan.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. I do have a couple questions that I just wanted to follow up on, and this has been a great conversation, and thank you so much for, again, your work and your expertise, Dr. Corrigan. I'm extremely fascinated by this concept of contraception. Doctor, you mentioned it would be costly, extremely costly, to set up a level or program that is successful. So have there been estimates of how much this would cost to do citywide for it to truly be successful the way in which it needs to be?
Well, two things. One is, I guess I should think in terms of what's relative to a city's budget for this public health issue, and maybe to that point, it would not be so extremely exorbitant as I stated. However, as far as I know, I've never seen any studies that propose what it would take to do it at a city level. I suppose you'd be able to, from the scientists with this product, to put some hypothetical cost situation. Let's just take Chinatown in Boston, and let's just say we wish to put all of Chinatown on this contraceptive within the boundaries of Chinatown, and to do it right according to dose application of what the female rats must consume and reconsume several times over the course for all of the female rats to be infertile. What would that cost? I would think that could be calculated. I myself have never done that. We haven't gotten through the basic stages of how would we control who's going to be drinking the product or eating the product or not, which in itself, before you get to cost estimates, you have to get through those difficult questions of that open population. And I'd also like to add that, if there are rats that are infertile because of this product, how do we address that? If someone sees a rat in their alleyway or next to the school or inside a restaurant or something, how do we address the fact that, don't worry, that rat cannot reproduce, but it still could be carrying fleas and ticks and lice and mites, and in its feces could still be pathogenic bacteria and viruses? How do we deal with that particular issue in saying, just wait another couple of months and things will be better? I don't know, it's a concept hard for me to get my head around.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer, and I'm so happy that the topic of climate change was brought up. There's always an environmental layer to all of this, and a warming climate is ripening the conditions for not just rats, but all pests, bed bugs. We saw what happened in Paris, and cockroaches, and I do appreciate the work, again, that's being done, but I do think there needs to be a more proactive approach to all of this, understanding that we're just going to keep producing more waste, and it's going to get warmer, and I just think it's going to be a calamity of events that lead us to, I hope not, that lead us to potentially what happened in Paris. I appreciate Councilor Weber's point about plastic containers in the North End. We unfortunately don't have any place to put those plastic containers, and so I know that we've talked a lot about and Dennis Roach as well, but talked a lot about some of the creative things that we could do to limit the food sources, the 22 sources that you discussed. I've spoken ad nauseum about what Japan does, which is the metal netting. It looks blue, but it's actually metal, and the rats can't chew through them, and so that's something I hope that we can consider. Trash contracts are up this year, and it's something that I've flagged for Dennis and the administration, just to try to bake in as much creativity in that to limit the waste and trash on our streets. I think the other thing I wanted to go through was just operating from the same set of data and facts, and we talked about 311, and we also talked about the students and Boston Water and Sewer and what they are, what sort of information they're gathering. And so from 311, unless you all have data from 311 that you'd like to share, I went into the open source data portal just to pull some facts and figures, unless you wanted to present them yourself. I don't want to represent.
No, I don't have 311 data with me, so.
Okay, so I'll go through them very, very quickly, and folks can find this online if you just Google 311 service requests. So according to the open source data, in 2024, out of 78,000 cases, there's only 350 tickets that had the word rat associated with it, which represents less than 1%. It's 0.4% of the tickets. And according to our own standards, we were on time for all of them except for one, which was labeled overdue, opened in January and closed in March. And then in 2023, out of 350 cases, there were 1,687 cases with the word rat associated with it, which is, again, less than 1%. It's at 0.4%. And 20 of those cases were categorized as overdue. And so given that we have this information, and people, I know folks don't call 311, not everybody calls 311, but there's a proactive approach to get more data. Can you just expand on that a little bit more? I apologize if I missed this, but what the students are gathering, how they're gathering it, the sources that they're working with, like Boston Water and Sewer, just so I understand exactly what data is being filtered into your respective departments.
You should go. Yeah, so I don't know the total amount of data. I know that 311 is data. We're working on Boston Water and Sewer. There are certain sewers that support rodent activity, and so currently we're looking at getting them that data so that they could come up with the predictive models. So it's, as far as I know right now, it's mainly 311 data.
Mainly 311, okay. And when do you expect that we would get a report on that or an assessment, or will there be something that we could review?
Yeah, I don't have, I can get back to you with that answer.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Corrigan, you had mentioned the report is almost complete. Do you have an anticipated date of when that final report will be done so that it can be submitted to the committee and make sure that it's a part of the public record?
Yes, so April was the target date for me to finish that report, and that's where I am. But I would like to get that to you get it off my desk also, quite honestly, no. But as soon as possible. But April was the target month for that.
Thank you so much. And switching to budget, thank you for providing the organizational structure and the workflow. That was helpful. That was going to be one of my questions. What is the operating expense in the aggregate for pest control and rat abatement? So how much are we spending on this particular topic right now? Do we have a number for that?
I don't have that number. I can get back to you with that.
Okay. Do you have a ballpark of how much we're spending on personnel, services, contracts?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly get you that number, but we can probably get you a better number if we talk just about rodent control. Pest control will be spread across different entities, so it'd be a little harder to give you. We can give you a ballpark number on that, but there are multiple agencies that are also doing just general pest control.
Okay. Why
I
don't we
can
focus
say
in on
the
rats?
head count of the division is 20 people. We got 16 of them being inspectors. No. 14. Thank you. 14 of them being inspectors, 5 admin, and 1, obviously, the director. I want to say the ballpark on bait and the equipment is around between 150 and 200,000 at most, but I don't want to be wrong on that.
No, for the yearly for bait and equipment, it's somewhere around 15,000, I would say, yearly for purchase of actual pest control products. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure about staffing and salaries.
Yeah, but the head count, you have it.
Okay. Thank you for that. And in terms of contracts or consulting services, what is the overall line item? How much was budgeted for this year for the consultation with Dr. Corrigan, and what's budgeted for next year?
Do you have that?
Now, I can tell you, for the consultation with Dr. Corrigan, I believe is about 20,000, roughly, but we can follow up with more accurate data.
And is it in this year's? Oh, it's for this year's budget.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we'll go for a second round. I think Councilor Flynn wants to get a little bit more specific about the language, so we can do that and do another round of questions. But again, I appreciate the answers to my questions, and I'll pass it over to Councilor Flynn for his second round.
Thank you, Councilor Carter. So I know we have 14 inspectors. Are these 14 inspectors that are designated for pest controls exclusively?
So they're environmental health inspectors. They they're all licensed to do pest control. They all have their core pesticide license through the state. And they all do pest control inspections. We have 3 shifts. The shift that starts at 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. do the majority of the actual pest control. As I said, the main function is the enforcement of the state sanitary code, so that's inspections and writing violations.
Exclusively on pest control related issues?
Exclusively on sanitation issues.
So what are some of the other duties besides pest control?
So it would be rodent complaints or trash complaints that mention rodents. And then I think that determines, if it doesn't mention rodents, it might be deferred to code enforcement.
14 inspectors. How many of the inspectors work on the weekends?
We don't have staffing on the weekends.
What time does the shift end on Friday?
So we have inspectors that start at 4 a.m. And we have inspectors till 4 p.m. We have 1 inspector that works 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, and he finishes Thursday at 5:45.
As of last year, we also have an on-call inspector at all times, so we do have a rodent control inspector available
On-call.
24 hours a
No,
day.
I understand.
For emergency.
But basically, from 4 p.m. on Friday till Monday morning, we don't necessarily have anyone in the city doing pest control work.
Unless it's an emergency and we need the on-call inspector.
Well, that's why I'm seeking to have a standalone City of Boston department. Weekends are critical. That's when a lot of people go to restaurants. That's when a lot of people go to bars or taverns, and people get off work, and there's a lot of parties in my neighborhood, to be honest with you, where people are out in their backyards, young people, contributing to these quality of life issues. 14 inspectors, but we need inspectors on the weekends. That's a critical time. I think that's the most important time to have inspectors, is on the weekends. Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Friday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. That's when a lot of people are home from the work week, and they're gathering as a group at their house. They're gathering as a group at a restaurant. That's my focus, is to streamline this, to coordinate this. But I'll stop there. Just reading and going over this ordinance itself, is there anything in here that you have significant concerns with or is not accurate? The proposed ordinance.
I don't have it pulled up in front of me right now. I do want to say I think that's a great point regarding the weekends that we will definitely take a look at. The only thing that I can recall from my last reading is just the fact of standing up a brand new office is the only thing that is problematic to me in terms of, do we need to do things? Can we do things to improve our current office? I'm open to all those conversations and to all of your feedback, as well as the feedback from Dr. Corrigan.
This issue I focus on every budget season, and in every budget season I ask, are we going to get inspectors for the weekends? And I get different answers depending on who I speak with. But my point is, if you're saying, Chief, that you're not heading in this direction where we're not going to establish a standalone City of Boston department, I understand that. But on the other hand, we can't say that we're not going to have inspections and we're not going to do pest control on the weekends. These are quality of life issues. These are public safety issues. These are public health issues. We have to be at this 7 days a week 24 hours a day, make significant progress. We can't give up an hour anytime during the week. So I'm somewhat frustrated, not at you guys, I'm just frustrated at the system where we don't have pest control taking place on the weekends, Saturdays, Sundays. I'm also discouraged about my neighborhood in Chinatown, where people still take out garbage. And as Dr. Corrigan said, there's a specific way to take out garbage. And the way you take out garbage is not you don't take out the garbage bag and place it on Nealon Street. But my constituents in Chinatown don't necessarily have barrels. Their apartments just are not conducive for barrels. So they end up taking the garbage out in a bag. And I'm not blaming them, but we need to do better than that. This is a public health issue. Do you know where the highest rate of asthma is in Boston? It's in Chinatown. And I work with City Council and now Mayor Wu on this issue. And it has the highest rate of asthma for many reasons, including pest control, including the highway system and other issues. But neighborhoods that are close to downtown Boston deserve a specific attention from city officials, from city government on quality of life issues, including pest control, including trash pickup. So again, if we're not going to establish a standalone City of Boston department, and I disagree with that, but how are we going to address quality of life issues in Chinatown or Brighton if we don't establish this department? Will things improve in those neighborhoods? So everyone knows where I stand on this issue. I want to see a city department on this. And I know it's going to take time. I'm going to continue advocating for it. But what improvements are we going to make, Chief, as it relates to this city budget on pest control inspectors throughout the city? 14 throughout the work week is just not going to cut it, in my opinion. What is this city budget going to look like as we address pest controls in the budget?
Thanks for that question, Councilor. As I mentioned, and as we've demonstrated here today, we've been working for a few months now to develop a plan, which we're going to call the Boston Road Action Plan. We're expecting the report in a few weeks. That will help inform all of us as to what changes we need to make in order to, and I'd prefer to wait and get that report before. I don't want to give a blanket request and say that we need something. We want to make sure that whatever we're asking for, we're being judicious, and we're also doing the best that we can with our current resources.
Right, I understand. I respect your position, Chief, and I respect the work that you're doing. But my job is advocating for my constituents. And I take that very seriously. I just can't continue allowing what's taking place in Chinatown, where we don't have an enhanced focus on quality of life issues, enhanced focus on pest control in Chinatown. That's why people elected me. They want me to focus on these nuts and bolts issues. And taking garbage down to Nealon Street or Essex Street in a bag, and then as you're there often, Chief, and the seagulls come an hour later, and then the bag is completely ripped open. It's a recipe for disaster. I need a commitment during this budget that we're going to address this issue in Chinatown, but also Councilor Braden has concerns, and Councilor Coletta has concerns, and Councilor Weber. We all do, but the 14 inspectors is concerning to me. Why so few inspectors in a major city like Boston?
Well, first, I would say those 14 inspectors are just on the rodent control team. We have other inspectors, in addition to that, who are dealing with rodent control and pest control throughout the city. They're in different divisions. They're not just solely focused on rodent control, but rodent control is a part of their duties. For example, I mentioned our health division inspectors who deal with all the food establishments. A huge part of their job is to make sure there's pest control in those establishments, and establishments are closed whenever we find that there's an issue that's not being adequately addressed. Just to give you another example. So we don't only have 14 inspectors. We have 14 inspectors who are also licensed pest control applicators who also do baiting and treatment as well as other things.
And then when the team gets back on Monday, how many complaints are there in the 311 system that they then have to deal with starting Monday morning in trying to catch up with the workload that's been ongoing for 72 hours maybe?
So I'll defer to John on that, but I can tell you that in the past several budgets, we have come before this body and we have asked for increased investment in the environmental services team, and you have given us what we've asked for. But John, can you take the rest of the question?
So the amount of complaints that come in, it's seasonal, Councilor. I would say that from May to September, that we start to see complaints increase. I would say that there is more complaints on a Monday because 3 days we haven't answered complaints, but it's manageable.
Okay, I understand. I can continue. I don't want to monopolize the time when my colleagues are here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. I was giving you extra time, seeing that you are the sponsor. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to get a better understanding of, different departments across the city have their own integrated plan from pest management, whatever. So I know the superintendent of schools has a superintendent circular on the integrated pest management plan. I know that another anecdote, like I know I was at the Jackson Man at a writers group one night, and I was up in the cafeteria space, and it wasn't a rat race, it was a mouse race, but there was a lot of little fellows running around. So I know it's a reality in our schools that. So then also, property management has put out bids for, Public Works has bids out. How does that integrate with your work as well? Like, is it very piecemeal, or is there a coherent sort of strategy across the city for pest management, integrated pest management, that we sort of know where the resources are and where the gaps are?
So that's what we're currently working on with the Boston Road and Action Plan. We support those agencies. Quality control, most of their pest control is contracted with outside pest control companies. So we review if we have an issue at a school, we would show up, check the logbook, address any issues. We're working with Boston Public Schools on different rat issues where we use our carbon monoxide machines to treat on top of what their contracted services are. But I think that this Boston Road and Action Plan is looking at all the departments, how we can share data and how we can support each other to be more effective.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you about, like in Alston Brighton, we have a lot of construction and demolition. And I know residents will tell you that, when this demolition, like down on the Alston Labs project down on Western Ave, when that came down, like everybody reported a big spike in rodent activity across. Like, what's the sort of gold standard for, baiting? And I know you work with Boston Water and Sewer on this one, but, what's a reasonable time ahead of a demolition to do baiting, and how long afterwards, and what sort of an area should we be covering?
So for a demo permit, we have a community sanitation requirement that comes through our office where they have to have a pest control report in order to get the permit. And then that will trigger an inspection by one of my inspectors who will go out, inspect the site for rodent activity, make sure that there's monitoring stations around the perimeter of the site.
So, do you do that ahead of the demolition, or you assess whether there's any rodent, like I think it's a given that there's rodent activity there, you know, do you assess, do you look for droppings and whatever to see if there's rodent activity, but if...
Burrows, but they're
burrows.
required to give a pest control so that the property has been serviced
Yeah.
in order to acquire the permit to demo. the
Yeah,
building.
yeah.
Sure.
And the perimeter around, sort of radius around the...
Right. So there is also a commissioner's bulletin which can hold construction companies accountable for pest control that is dispersed from a site, if we could prove it, up to 300 feet.
Okay. And then we always talk about dry ice, and the last time we had a conversation about this in council, you said that there was you had to get a permit in Billerica and drive to Rockland to pick up your dry ice, and it all had to happen. And they open at 9 o'clock, and your shift starts at 4 in the morning. Like, did we ever sort that out?
No, the situation is the same. The way we solved that was the purchase of the machines. We deal with carbon monoxide, not the carbon dioxide, which is the dry ice. It's more cost effective, and it's basically the same effect. Different gas, but has the same success and effect.
So dry ice you can't use close to buildings. Can you use
10 feet.
Is it the same with carbon monoxide?
Correct.
Machine?
If the building is occupied, if you can confirm that the building is unoccupied, then you can treat the burrows. We are also investing in a tanked carbon dioxide, which you can control the PSI, and you can use that right up against a foundation of an occupied building. That's July.
How many how many machines do you have?
So currently we have 2 Burrow RX machines, which are larger machines on wheels, and then one handheld. It's called the Cheetah. So 3 machines.
Is that enough?
I think so with the current work that we have. So most of the pest control, the pest control that we do is public ways, public sewers, public parks.
And that brings me to the other conversation about just in private spaces. Like I know I did a site visit. There was nobody from Inspectional Services with me, but we did a site visit up on Chestnut Hill Ave. A condominium group had spent $30,000 on trying to, they had to dig up their patios, and which was crazy. And it was just not unending. And they thought the whole thing was under control, and then just bang, it all started all over again. So, and there was a restaurant next door, close by, like from you to me, and it had grease and food wasn't being disposed of, and that was the problem. And it just they could never get on top of the rat issue, as long as that restaurant continued to be a really good source of nutrition for the rodents. So. I don't know. It's when private citizens have to put out so much money to try and address a rodent problem that's sort of uncontrollable because a restaurant next door is not doing their job. Is there any recourse to that? Like, do they have any recourse to stop that situation? Like, I know.
So the recourse would be reported to us. We would come out, do an inspection. If it was a restaurant, we would involve the health department, right violations. It's a violation to have grease on the ground, to not maintain your grease traps, to not maintain your trash. We would address food source and provide whatever assistance we could.
And can I add, because I'm shocked and this is on us, that we haven't yet talked about the site cleanliness program. that your division is running. I'll let you talk about it, but it is something where I think all of us can collaborate in growing and increasing uptake of that program. So essentially, if you have a dumpster, whether you're a food establishment or a large building, condominiums, whatever it is, if you have a dumpster, you are required to register with ISD as part of the site cleanliness program, which then allows John's team to get eyes on that dumpster at least once a year and make sure it's being properly secured and all of the things that we need to have done in those dumpsters to prevent rodent infestation. So I don't know if you want to say more about it, but we can use help with awareness raising about this requirement and to again increase the uptake. I don't know if you want to add, John.
Right, and so we've invested in that program. We've hired an admin to just work on that program. To grow it.
Registering the dumpsters.
Yeah.
Yes, it's called the site cleanliness
Site
license, the
cleanliness.
bright green license that
Yeah.
you see so we're working on getting more residential buildings into that in Brighton, which would require a yearly inspection so that we could get eyes on the dumpsters to make sure they're covered, that they have dumpster plugs, that they're in good shape.
We also need to work with the management companies and the dumpster companies as well. Like there was a dumpster outside the senior centre. The senior centre in Brighton, which is a city-owned property, was getting tickets because the dumpster had a hole in it and the rats were running in and out. So, I think it's a tough one. We have a lot to do.
Yeah.
Right, and the site cleanliness, the last thing I'll say is that it does give us the ability to give large fines. So code enforcement is the enforcement agency for the site cleanliness program. We manage the license, but that is $1,000 a day that could be issued.
Okay. Thank you so much. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Weber.
Thank you. Mr. Org, there was rats infesting a dumpster, how long would it, and maybe you already answered this question, but how long would it take to do an inspection, would you expect?
Like response of a 311 complaint?
Correct, yeah.
Within 48 hours.
Okay. I guess, and for Dr. Corrigan, I assume you had something, New York has a rat czar, right, New York City?
Correct.
And I guess what's your evaluation on how that's working? How is it different in New York from before the rat czar to, I guess it's been in for less than a year, but what's your assessment?
My assessment is the rat czar is a very critical position. As a position, she works underneath, of course, the mayor's office directly. And it's been my observations and meeting with the rat czar, it's been essential. It's been highly effective. It's pointing the compass in the right direction. With a big city like New York City, it's same as Boston. It's about getting everyone to acknowledge that they all have a play in rat management in a city and getting everyone to collaborate. And then also getting every department, for example, is going to have some type of responsibility or assignment. I'll use that word as well. And so you need someone to, meet, issue those responsibilities, divide them up, sit around the table. Everybody gets their share of what can you do for the rats. And then the rat czar is the one, of course, underneath the influence of the mayor's office, to track that, to monitor, to encourage, to measure, and then to report in a regular meeting monthly in case as to progress. So I know it's a long answer, but if someone said to me, is a rat czar critical for city rat management, the answer is yes.
And I guess what's your analysis on, I guess, will this be addressed in the report, or do you have any opinions about what kinds of resources, we've invested in combating the problem, and whether it's enough, not near enough, getting close to enough?
That's one of the $60,000 questions for the report, and those are the kind of metrics and measurements and comments, and considerations. That's the word a consultant typically uses for a city is to, the following should be considered. Here are the benefits, here could be some drawbacks, so forth and so on. You know, everything, as you all know better than I, everything comes with the pluses and the minuses usually attached to it, and it's always a difficult wrestle a little bit with limited budgets and city budgets and so forth and positions. But yes, as I have gone through this process with you guys for 4 months, I do, of course, see things where, to use, Councilor, Flynn's comment, is enhancement. Several enhancements across the board, across different departments that could be made that's going to help in that regard. And I think some of them won't be that heavy a lift, and others may in fact be a heavy lift. But I would say that Boston does have a serious rat problem, like the other cities along the East Coast. And I also think that's going to increase for all these cities. And we need to make sure we address those adequately in terms of enhancements.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. I just have a couple more questions. How many inspectors have we added over the last 2 years for this particular section of ISD?
So additional positions, one. We did have a vacancy, and we added one additional inspector. So for a while, we were at 12. We are now at 14.
Okay. And how many cases do any of them have at any given time? Is there an average?
It should be under 10 on any given day.
Okay. And then the average time that you would say to resolve these cases is 24 to 48 hours?
Depending on the season, but 48 hours should be the longest.
Okay. Do we have any other inspectors within ISD working on the weekends that are not on call? Like building inspectors?
On call.
They're all on call? Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you so much. And then just getting into the language a little bit more and getting specific about where the administration is at for this particular ordinance. So looking at section 1, if you can just let us know what you all are doing already, what your existing efforts are for, there's 3 main points in section 1. And I'll do them one by one just because I don't know if you have it in front of you, if that's okay. There needs to be a dedicated office to coordinate multi-department efforts to reducing rat and pest populations. So talk about how you're already coordinating within city departments, just generally if you can give like the elevator pitch, I guess, or the summary of what you're already doing, if the answer is we are already doing this. So we can start there. So how are you coordinating multi-department efforts to reducing rat and pest populations?
Yeah, I think that we are at the early stage of doing more with that. There's always been coordination between John's team and other agencies, but we recognize that needs to be improved, and that's a part of what we're planning to accomplish with the Road and Action Plan and convening departments and talking about this as a joint effort along with our consultant.
Okay. Is there a set meeting that takes place within the departments, like a set cadence to review what the cases are, what the work is? I know that climate resilience, there's a set task force or consortium of individuals within the city that meet regularly. So are you all meeting regularly?
So we meet within my department regularly, but I think what we're envisioning is at the completion of Dr. Corrigan's work, he will give us the recommendations, and from that point, our work will start with a regular meeting around rodent control.
Okay, great. And then the second point is to this office would develop overall pest control strategy. So how are you all already addressing this and whatever existing efforts are underway?
So
That's the Boston.
yeah, that's the Boston Road and Action Plan. We also have the work with the MIT students, and we're constantly looking at new technology. We were the first in the nation to use dry ice for pest control when dry ice was regulated by the federal government and difficult to get. We switched and found new technology to address that. And in July, we will be adopting the tanked CO2, which will allow us to treat more residential properties close to the building. So,
And then the third point is conducting outreach to residents on rodent mitigation methods. How are you all doing this already?
So I regularly go to neighborhood association meetings, neighborhood meetings. We have a director of publicity at ISD that has social media. We produced videos in multiple languages. I think we have Vietnamese, Spanish, and English. All of our education material is in 6 languages. We do lit drops in neighborhoods during neighborhood walkthroughs. We've done we probably do 1 to 2 a week of neighborhood walkthroughs where we take a group of constituents that are dealing with rodent issues. We go out, we'll walk the neighborhood, allow them, point to areas of concern, talk to them about best strategies around dealing with pest control, and then engaging the public while we're out there.
Thank you for those answers. Is there anything else in response to this ordinance that you all want to either accept, reject, speak publicly about before the completion of the report? Giving you the opportunity now.
No, like I said earlier, I think most of the goals that the ordinance is trying to accomplish, we agree with.
Okay. That's it for me. Are we good, co-sponsor or sponsor? Or do you have another?
Madam Chair, may I ask Dr. Corrigan 1 or 2 questions?
Sure. Dr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Corrigan, for being here, for the important work you're doing with the city of Boston, with the residents of Boston. So I know we highlighted somewhat the Office of Pest Control in New York City. You spoke about it as well. Can a major city like Boston address this type of quality of life issue 5 days a week, or do we need to be out there 7 days a week?
I definitely agree that rodent control and rodents, they are 24/7, 365. No mistake about that. So it would be difficult to have a complete program if there's not some type of weekend, assigned person to rodent emergencies, right? So to that point, idealistically, again, many times depending on budgets, but if someone was to ask me as a consultant, should there be someone or some inspector or someone responsible for those weekend moments that you outlined and scenarios that you outlined, Counselor, I would say yes. I do want to add, before the next question, the New York City program, the pest control services program in New York City is actually housed within another agency, and that is the Department of Health. It's a division of the Department of Health. The RATSAR person is out of the mayor's office specifically, and is the only person within the mayor's office as a director of rat. Her title is Director of Rat Mitigation for New York City. And so she's the one that gets all the agencies together, including the primary agency is the Department of Health, and within them, as an agency, they have a pest control services division. But there is no Office of the Pest Control as an independent agency answerable to the mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Corrigan.
Yes.
For a city such as Boston, Dr. Corrigan, what should our number be in terms of pest control licensed professionals? We have obviously 14, but a major city of Boston, what should that number be at if you had to estimate?
I would probably need to think about that, Counselor, very carefully and put all my particular factors in, and per capita and per size, and there's a lot of decisions that would go into answering. It seems like a simple question that I could give a number to, but not without careful thought and matching it up to all the other factors that I consider. But I would certainly make myself a note as to, in my report, I would give some type of response to that question. It's a very important question, I agree, but I would feel uncomfortable to actually state a number right here.
Thank you, Doctor, for your response. Just finally, as a district city councilor, I get most of my, or a good percentage of my constituent requests on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Quality of life issues, nuts and bolts issues, noise complaints, parties, parking enforcement, traffic, pest control. And on a Friday night or a Saturday night, I might be home with my wife watching television, and if there is a party somewhere in my neighborhood, residents are calling, and then residents the next morning are also calling about pest control issues in that same area, immediate area, because of the impact an outdoor cookout, unregulated cookout had. So that's where I'm coming from as a district city councilor, is these neighborhood services issues, nuts and bolts issues. We're in the middle of a budget, and like all district councilors, I need to do my due diligence and advocate for my district on these quality of life issues, and whether it's in South Boston or it's in, I already received texts from residents in Andrews Square telling me that what I already know, because I'm down there almost every day, that pest control is a major problem in Andrews Square as well. South Boston, South End, downtown Boston. But I want to say thank you to the panel for being here. I want to say thank you, Dr. Corrigan, for being here as well. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. Honored to work with you, my colleagues, and the sponsor as well, Councilor Braden.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. I'll give the opportunity to Councilor Braden or Councilor Weber if they have any departing remarks, and then we'll go to public testimony.
One big thing we bump into, and I'm sure you guys bump into it as well, is just being able to have responsive management companies. Like, you have a problem, there's a dumpster that needs attention, there's rodent problems, absentee landlords, we don't know who they are, where they are. A lot of the time with student housing, and then the management companies again are inaccessible or unresponsive when you do get a hold of them. Like, do you have any suggestions how we might be better able to hold them accountable?
So I think our violation process, although it takes a while, eventually we get, it's different than code enforcement where they're going based on assessment. We do title searches if we don't get good information or good service with the violation. So eventually we will get the correct owner of the property who was responsible. We try to work with management companies. They're required to have their information in the hallway posted. We will reach out to them. Some inspectors show right up at their office. But different than a code enforcement ticket, our violation process, if it is sent back and we don't get good service, either by constable or priority mail, our legal division will do a title search, and we will get the correct ownership.
Very good, thank you. And then I've also heard of people do it yourself sort of carbon monoxide effort by people using the tailpipes of their trucks and backing them up to rodent holes. I don't know, is that something that you approve of?
I wouldn't recommend using your car to treat. If you have a rodent issue, I know it's a service that you can, lots of pest control companies use these machines. You can reach out to us. If there is assistance that we can provide, we do try to provide, especially with those machines. But it is a service that I would recommend you hiring a licensed professional. Yeah,
I think that's probably good advice. Yeah. Thank you so much all for being here this afternoon, and thank you.
Thank you,
Madam.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Worrell? Oh my goodness, sorry, Councilor Weber. I apologize.
Oh, no, I just like Councilor Braden's thinking, about creative thinking about this problem, and I look forward to hearing more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to public testimony. We have one person signed up. Could you please stay and listen to our individual that signed up? I believe it is Richard Meinke. Please remember to state your name, neighborhood, and organization affiliation. Please speak into the microphone and keep your comments to 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, councilors. My name is Ricky Meinke. I'm an Allston Brighton resident and also the creator of the Rat City Arts Festival, a local grassroots festival that celebrates local artists, bands, and performers in what we locally call is Rat City. So to call yourself an Allston Rat or say you live in Rat City means you like to add humor to a situation that has plagued you, not due to the rat's fault, but many times to the fault of a landlord or property manager. When I had a rat die in the wall of my apartment, my landlord didn't remove it, but gave me a free month's rent and told me the smell will naturally go away. So many of our neighbors face rat issues in their living spaces, but because they are renters, they need to rely on management companies and property owners, and many times the issue is hardly addressed. I think about the family that rents in Allston Brighton, not being able to host dinner in their kitchen because a rat died in their stove, or the friends that can't use their backyard for a birthday party because a rat den moved in. Rats take away the sense of safety we have in our homes, and they take away the ability to enjoy our homes, but I don't believe they're the only ones to blame. That is why I support the establishment of an Office of Pest Control for the City of Boston. This office should be given the power and agency over not just catching rats and pests, but holding those accountable to that allow pests to proliferate in our neighborhoods. This office should have the agency to address the lack of management from property managers and landlords who, from their malfeasance, allow their tenants to experience this rat issue without any power to address it. So please, let the establishment of this office be a moment of empowerment for so many of our neighbors. So as the founder and director of the Rat City Arts Festival, I fully support the establishment of the Office of Pest Control and welcome a rat czar into our city. I also want to invite all of you to the events of the Rat City Arts Festival. On August 1st, we'll be hosting a rat walk in Allston to see the local hotspots and rat dens in our neighborhood. And on August 2nd, we'll be hosting a golden hour concert for our elderly and older neighbors to enjoy some music. And finally, on August 3rd, we'll be hosting our 3rd annual Rat City Arts Festival in Allston, or as what we like to call it, Rat City. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you for everything you do in the creation of the Rat City Arts Festival, the famed Rat City Arts Festival. Do we have anybody virtually for public testimony? Okay, I think this will conclude this hearing. I look forward to additional conversations, receiving that report. I'm sorry, did you have public testimony? Okay, please come down to the mic. We have one more. If you wouldn't mind, please stating your name, neighborhood, and affiliation, if you have one, for the record. Please keep it to 2 minutes. Thank
Yes, hello. My name is Samuel Pierce. I live in Dorchester, and I'm actually here on behalf of Las Hormigas. And the reason why I actually came here for this meeting is because I think that the rat problem is actually a problem across the city. And I think some of it is compounded by some of our construction issues. So for example, when they come and they shake up the foundation in some of the buildings, I think that that certainly displaces the rats. And so I think of this book called Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats and Them, how there's like this whole other world that they're obviously living in. And I think about the fact that some of the solutions could be very simple, which is that the trash collection is not the same all over the city. Some people can just put their bags on the street, and they don't have plastic containers where they are essentially safe from rats and vermin. And so I think that we're perpetuating the problem if we don't simply say that the rules apply to everyone. So we do have some simple solutions. Obviously now we have composting, we have, all these recycling and trash bins. Why don't we use them? And so I think that some of these simple solutions, as well as really showcasing the artistic side, maybe reading the book about Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats and Them, going to the Brighton play about the arts, looking at the Nutcracker and the Rat King might get people thinking about that. But then we also have to have different solutions where we're looking at the foundation. So for example, flooding and the way that rats are able to get into buildings are connected, because very soon we're going to be spending billions of dollars trying to figure out how do we stop the city from flooding. So I'm hoping that we can use a holistic approach. I'm very happy to see we have the expert panel that we have. Thank you, obviously, Commissioner Irish, for everything you do for our city. And thank you to the councilors, obviously Chair Weber and Chair Coletta and Chair Flynn and obviously Councilor Breeden for being here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sam. So I do look forward to receiving recommendations from this report. I think there are more conversations to be had when it comes to this docket. I will confer with the lead sponsor and sponsors and discuss what to do next. But for the time being, I think we've hit the limit on our conversation. I want to thank you again for your work on this, and thank you for being here and providing such thorough answers. This hearing on docket 0262 is officially adjourned. Thanks, everybody.